Welcome to elected members, staff. We've got a few people in the public gallery too. Welcome. Welcome to people joining us online. And I'll ask Councillor Handford to please do the council blessing.
Kia ora, e a mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua i o mātou aroaro, e pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara huapai mo ngā hapore e mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua kia tōtika tā mātou mahi, a mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri, ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha.
Kia ora, Councillor Handford. Item number 3, apologies. Councillor Pravanov and Councillor Coe are both on a leave of absence. We have one apology today. Kim Tahiwi sent an apology through. Can I have a mover for that apology? Are there any further apologies? Moved by Councillor Handford, seconded by Councillor Warwick. All in favour? Aye, that's carried. Thank you. Any declarations of interest? So we now move on to public speaking.
Yes.
Oh, declaration of interest?
Yes, I need to declare that I was involved in submissions on behalf of the Raumati Community Board, the Raumati Village Business Association and Chamber of Commerce. I do have an interest in Te Ara Koroai, but probably not a conflict.
Okay, that's noted. So we have Evie Dewhurst. Welcome, Evie. You've got 3 minutes to present to us today, and then there might be some questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora. I'm Evie Dewhurst. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak today. I'm here to speak about the long-term plan submission, more specifically the climate action rate, and how I, as a rangatahi of Kapiti, believe that it is crucial moving forward to embed climate thinking within our community in such a way that policies that you as councillors approve of and apply know the impact in our day-to-day life. I acknowledge that climate action and doing what's best for the environment is not accessible or affordable for many in our community. So I believe that it's a privilege for me to be speaking here today and taking part in my own action. I hope you consider my words moving forward with your decision making at this table. I would like to share my thoughts on the future of Kapiti and the greater world, and how it's important to act as the future that we want to live in. I think back to a global cities class when my teacher asked if we'd eat bugs if it will save the environment. I immediately said yes, but obviously not everyone was so keen on this. He then continued to ask us about the implications and logistics of this in the greater scheme of things, and whether or not it's a viable option for the future. I believe that in time, the effects of climate change will be so strong and in your face that society will adapt to live in it, and maybe then everyone will be eating bugs. But for now, I fear that not everyone in Kapiti are on the same page about taking care of our environment, and I fear that it will be too late once we all come to the same conclusion, that we need to take action to prevent severe effects on our environment. And so, that is why I believe that the climate action rate will be beneficial for all living in Kapiti, as it allows for true action to take place before it's too late. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Evie. It's a great presentation. Any questions? Thank you very much. Asha Wilson-Goldman.
Kia ora, ngā mihi o te aheri. Good afternoon, ko Asher Wilson-Goldman tōku ingoa. My name's Asher Wilson-Goldman, and I'm here to speak today on behalf of Low Carbon Kapiti, an organisation with hundreds of members and supporters across the Kapiti Coast District, focused on action on climate change both locally, nationally and internationally. And I'm also, like Evie, here to speak and to encourage you all to support the climate action rate in today's decision making. I'm not going to talk about the specific details of what this rate, how this rate will work. You already know that this isn't about asking for more money from Kapiti Coast ratepayers. This is simply about committing to allocating a specific amount of the rates take towards climate action. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because I know that there is some nervousness in this community, both and potentially around the council table as well, about what that might look like, about the reaction that might provoke. We have seen considerable misinformation being spread in this community already about climate action and about climate adaptation. And it is my proposition to you that taking a strong stance on a climate action rate is the best move that Kapiti Coast District Council can make to help counter that misinformation. Because it is only by saying proudly, we believe in climate action, as KCDC has already done by declaring a climate emergency. We believe in climate action, as you have already done by taking this action that you have already taken on climate change. And we believe in climate action by allocating a specific amount for a climate targeted rate and being clear and public and communicative about what that rate is being spent on, that we can start to counter the misinformation. Because you don't fight against misinformation by hiding. You don't fight against misinformation by retreating into yourselves and pretending something isn't happening. You should all be proud of the work that Kapiti Coast is doing already to fight climate, to mitigate against the climate crisis, and to adapt to the impact of climate change. You should be proud of that, and I urge you all to adopt this climate targeted rate as a way of saying to our community, we are proud of the work that we're doing, we want to bring you along on this journey with us, and we want to talk about it. Don't retreat into our shells, but instead be proud and say, we are a council that believes in climate action, we are a community that believes in climate action, and we want everyone to come on this journey together. So when you are making a vote today on the recommendation about the climate targeted rate, I would urge you all to vote against the current recommendation and instead to adopt the climate action rate for the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you for your submission. What disinformation are you talking about?
I think it's fair to say that if you look at, for example, any of the Kapiti Coast community Facebook pages, and there are a number of them, there are a lot of really good conversations going on at the moment, particularly around the CAP process and around climate adaptation. But contained within those good conversations is also a lot of misinformation. I, for instance, yesterday was reading people saying that insurance companies would only change people's insurance in response to KCDC making decisions around the CAP process. That is not true. That is not how insurance companies work. They have their own analysis of sea level rise. They have their own analysis of the impact of climate change, and they make decisions based on that, not based on what KCDC does or does not do. And that is feeding into significant fear amongst the population of Kapiti. And at the moment, there isn't a clear voice from council that I've seen that responds to that, that details how these things actually work, what the CAP process actually means, what climate action and climate mitigation actually is. And so that is misinformation. It is leading to fear and confusion amongst a number of our people living in this district.
Would you agree that there's a number of views in the community that may not be your views, that may not be disinformation?
Oh,
one person's truth is another person's lies?
Absolutely.
So,
there are a range of views within our community on the likely impact of climate and how it will impact specifically on Kapiti. No question at all. But there are equally, some of those views do not hold a basis in fact. Some of them are contestable and arguable, and we should have those contestations, we should have those discussions, but some of them are not.
And some of those would come from the climate sector as well, from all spheres of the sides of the argument.
I mean, I can only speak on what Low Carbon Kapiti speaks to, and certainly I wouldn't say that anyone has accused us of any misinformation with our material.
Thank you.
Councillor Warwick.
Hi, Asha. Just briefly, we do a lot of work around climate stuff because we have to mitigate what's going to happen with water and everything. But so what specifically do you think that the climate targeted rate would be funding?
So in our written submission from Low Carbon Kapiti, we spoke to some of the suggestions there, so I won't go into that in too much detail. But I would say that in the future, we'd like to see some form of additionality being funded through that rate, so things that are not business as usual. There is already a lot of business as usual that KCDC does that is funded through business as usual funding. We would like in the future to see other things funded. But I think what I'm saying today and what I really think is the important aspect to this climate action rate is it gives KCDC a strong basis to have that discussion with the community. If you are charging a climate action rate, then you as a council are compelled to explain to the community what that rate is funding and why it is funding that. And that gives you a really strong basis to then communicate the importance of climate action and climate mitigation. Without that, it just becomes one of many things that KCDC funds: roads, libraries, parks, etc.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Isha. I agree with you and with Evie. Thank you for your submission. That this keeps that it does allow for open communication. I would just say that there are a variety of views around the table, as you all know, but most of those haven't been expressed publicly because there is a process underway which we will have to consider and vote on. So it's not that people don't have a view about these things, they do, but to express those publicly is probably not a wise thing.
Absolutely. The predetermination issue at local government is certainly a real one.
Yeah.
Right, thanks, Asher.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Quentin Paul. So we have 3 minutes for each speaker, plus questions.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much,
Good
Janet.
afternoon.
How are you? I'm talking about the summary of submissions that were put in as an appendix for this meeting today for the long-term plan. I have grave doubts about the accuracy of the summary of submissions prepared by Public Voice Limited. My initial suspicions were raised when I scanned down to 13.2.46 Pool Family Trust Submission 320. The text attributed to Pool Family Trust has nothing whatsoever to do with the Pool Family Trust actual submissions. And I'd like to table the 2 submissions that the Pool Family Trust put in. The Pool Family Trust did not submit, advocate in any shape or form for the rezoning of land in Waikanae North area from rural to urban to align with the Council's growth strategy and enable residential development. I then scanned back to the results for proposals 1 to 3. I was bemused to find that there was only reporting of those who ticked the boxes in each proposal. I am aware that at least 8, possibly more, submissions have stated none of the above, with reasoning. There could be a lot more. By not including these submission responses into the results, Public Voice Limited has skewed the perception of the Kapiti community. It has also left you as councillors with information that is incomplete and not the full picture. The other issue is actually with the original layout and wording for the proposals for the community of Kapiti to submit upon. They do not attempt to give the full picture of what is involved. For example, Proposal 3, providing more sustainable council housing for our older people, does not include the information that the council is proposing, shown in the LTP, to gift or give away $21+ million of ratepayers' assets, and this was shown in the LTP. This is a material omission in accountancy terms. I noticed that we also, to give away our water assets, you require a poll of all ratepayers to do this. I would have thought that would have given you a heads up about giving away other ratepayers' assets. This issue, if you had alerted people about it, this might have changed the community's view of how the issue is to be resolved. I can continue with other examples if you wish. Proposal 1, no rejection option. Proposal 2, no option for any quantum of rates rise or decrease. This document is fatally flawed, while the analysis by Public Voice Limited is inaccurate. I would like to see the councillors reject the summary as inadequate to have any confidence in its results. Now, subsequent to that, I just received an email from Democracy Services, which I'd like to share with you. It came in at 12 o'clock this afternoon. The number of rural properties without water supply is 10.7 of your total ratepayer base. Total ratepayers without wastewater is 14.75 of your ratepayer base. So therefore, your 17% rate raise to the majority of the rating community of Kapiti will not be 17%. It looks like it's going to be plus 20% when you actually take those people out, because they cannot be rated at the moment. In the LTP, they are shown as being rated. And I think this is a fatal flaw in your LTP. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I have a question of clarification. I'm not sure where we get this, but the point that Quentin's raised around the rating of rural properties for a service that they're not getting, so I think it's important that that we get that clarified. And I wasn't sure. We had a very, very brief conversation while I was grabbing the coffee about whether whether the wastewater was a targeted rate or it was a general rate. So if it was targeted, then presumably they wouldn't be getting rated for it. So I don't know. I don't want to throw anybody under a bus here, but we are voting later on a LTP. It would be quite handy to have that.
Yeah, so I'll ask staff to clarify that when we get to that item on the agenda.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yep.
Items. Thank you, Quentin. Thank you very much. Mr. Andrews, John Andrews.
Thank you very much. I've given the clerk the statement for today, so you can print that out for you. Good afternoon again. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm not going to go through the detail of the presented issues I've given to you over many, many weeks over the rating levies. I will not ask any questions other than to state some pretty obvious matters. The main one being the charging of water services to rural ratepayers that the council cannot provide to them. And I fully support Quentin's comments. Just to briefly follow up on this morning's statement about the audit risk and materiality threshold. The statement that close to $4 million has been spent without result in a non-RMA compliant organisation regarding CAP and not being in the LTP budget is of concern that I'm also referring to the Attorney General. CAP does not meet the threshold for district planning, and Jacobs is not RMA compliant, and they received the bulk of that funding. It's already been paid out to them on contract with no results. 2.5 million. That's material. Okay. It's what you don't say that concerns me regarding the undisclosed expenditure in the accounts. This is where the fact of not disclosing something leads to perversion of the ratings process and possibly even misinformation, because you're not letting information out to the community as you should be. The process needs to be publicly disclosed. I will not address the rating levy issues other than to say that KCD has materially misled the public over the rates and projected average increases, which are, when tested, and I would request you, I already have requested the auditors to do that, to retest that sample, because what you'll find is they're substantially untrue. They do not come out at 17%. In some cases, they go to 50%, and that's a huge overstatement. The disposal of the public housing should not be made as a gift. And it's a pretty good point that Quentin raises. If you're doing a referendum on CAP, then, or for example, the Maori ward, then why not do a referendum on a $22 million asset? Both, again, a matter for the Attorney General. Please remember my statement about equity, fairness and reasonableness. I strongly recommend you, in conclusion, to set the rates at as I said this morning, an absolute fixed rate per rating unit at 12% increase, not 50, not 24%. But, and the but's a big one, not based on misrepresented averages or fabricated medians, which have misrepresented by you and EY from the LTP, but an absolute 12%. That means it's 12% absolute fixed over last year's rates. So if I have a $3,000 rating of my property, I get charged another $360, not the 24% that you are trying to charge without disclosing that to the public. And that's just one example. So I sincerely trust that you're going to have some reasonable logic around how you calculate this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Are there any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. With regards to the social housing, and this was raised earlier as well from Quentin, are you advocating that council should be selling the housing?
What I am advocating is that it's not your core business. The government has a huge issue with public housing right now, as you well know. And to be honest, it's better to go to people who can manage it better and do a better job. That's all. Whether that's by selling or by lease or by coming into an arrangement with a CHP that can do it for you better, but don't just hand it over. And that's not really that's not fair.
So that, and just one last one,
Sure.
about in terms of the housing trust that's being established that would be effectively become a chip, would you be okay with that being, rather, it's not so much as a gift as vesting that in that kind of entity?
Vesting the assets as into another legal organisation is the same as gifting, because you're not getting any consideration for the value of that 21 million. Correct?
Yep. No, that's it.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, John.
Thanks very much.
Move on to members' business. Any leaves of absence can be communicated through the Mayor's office. I haven't been advised of any matters of an urgent nature, so we're on to report 7.1, long-term plan submission deliberations.
Madam Chair, can I just ask for some clarity?
Some clarity about the report.
We have 7.1 and 7.3 on the agenda, fees and charges. My reading of the information, and I'd like some clarity around this, 7.3 seems to impact on 7.1, yet we're making a decision around 7.1 before 7.3. I was just wondering whether they needed to be swapped around.
Through you, Your Worship. Both reports
Impact on each other, do they?
Yeah, so 7.1 is that table at the back is actually just trying to show what the rates impact of officer recommendations, which also include the fees and charges. So it's a catch-all. We wanted to show you one rates increase figure. So you have two changes to fees and charges in 7.3 and a number of other issues in 7.1. We put it in 7.1 so that you could see the full scope of the decisions that you make. But you're absolutely right. 7.1 can't be voted on without, they sort of go together.
Okay, no, that's gone. I'm picking that it comes out in the wash when we vote on this next week as such.
Yeah, sure.
So through your worship, look, the purpose of, the fees and charges, we're seeking council to adopt the fees and charges today, mainly for the dog registration process. The outcome of 7.1 will yield a draft rates revenue increase. The 27th of June is when you formally adopt the long-term plan and set the rates.
Is that clear now? Is that all right? Yeah, I'm sure we will. So I'll invite staff to present this report, Mark and Cheryl, and also address the question that was raised in public speaking time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the earlier question related to point of clarification around the three waters. So in terms of our rates, we have targeted rates for our water, for our wastewater, and for our stormwater. So the council determines year on year what the costs are to provide those services, and then that flows into a targeted rate, which is then levied onto ratepayers that benefit from those services. So we do not charge water, stormwater, and wastewater to every single ratepayer. If you're within 100 metres of the connection and you choose not to connect, you pay the charge. If you're not connected, you don't pay the charge. The cost of the three waters is levied on the ratepayers that benefit from the service. I hope that clarifies that, and it's a targeted rate.
Great. Thank you for that.
So thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Cooper has a question about that.
Sorry, so how does that reconcile with the OIA that Quentin has got saying that, I think it was 19% or 14% of people being levied that haven't got the water infrastructure?
My understanding of the information that was requested is what percentage of the rating base do not receive or are not connected to the three water services that don't have wastewater, don't have stormwater, and don't have water. I think what we've heard is we're being told that we levy water, wastewater, and stormwater charges on every single ratepayer, and that is incorrect. We do not.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Paul. Sorry, Mr. Paul. Public speaking time has come to an end. Thank you.
So thank you, Your Worship. So report 7.1 is the long-term plan.
Sorry, point of order. Can I just?
Okay, we've got a point of order. Where in the standing orders are you referring to?
Yeah. Seek clarification from Mark in respect to the LTP and the question that Quentin has posed.
Okay, that's a question rather than a point of order. Feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, so what Quentin, I think, is saying is that the LTP is grouping in all ratepayers on that water intake, and that's actually not the case. So does that skew our, how does that affect our numbers?
Yes.
Just for clarification, I'm trying to be difficult, but I think it's
No, we've got to be clear on this.
Yep.
That's a good question.
Worth asking.
So what the LTP, I think we should say the consultation document. So the consultation document has worked out what the increase to the rates revenue is from 23-24 to year one of the LTP 24-25. And what we've said is one of the reasons for increasing the rates revenue is an increase in depreciation to Three Waters and an increase in loss of better off funding. So the cost of providing the Three Waters has gone up. So the rates revenue, the total rates revenue that the council needs to collect has gone up. Some of that relates to the cost of providing those three water services. We do not charge every single ratepayer for water, stormwater, or wastewater. Your total rates revenue has gone up, so the size of your cake has increased, and then we divvy that up according to our rating mechanisms. So we do not charge every single ratepayer for water, stormwater, or wastewater, but your total rates revenue has gone up for the cost of providing those services. So the waterfall chart that we've seen in the past has shown what's driving the increase in the rates revenue requirement from one year to the next, and what we've identified is that the better off funding, actually ratepayers were better off. Those that pay for the Three Waters were not rated for $3.2 million. And so because that funding was one-off in 24-25, we need that $3.2 million in by way of rates. So when we divvy up the size of the pie, or make the slices, we only charge the ratepayers that actually incur those services. So we are not charging Three Waters to every single ratepayer in the district.
Okay, we'll move on with the report now. We might need a bit more clarification on that over the next week or two.
Sorry, can I just ask, because we were doing like response to public speakers built into this. I don't know if did you get a copy of this from John? Now I know it's only a very small sample, and I'm not going to make any comment about it at all, other than to say that where, say, 29 Emerald Glen Road has an increase of 50.8%, and I'm just wondering if assuming that was correct on, and this is we sampled 20,000+, so it's probably easy enough to pick out some really aberrant ones, but I'm not suggesting that's what the case is. But I do have a question about what would have caused that level of increase, and it went from 4,065, so it's not like it was a cheap rate anyway, and it went from that to 6,132. So I'm just wondering what might have caused that jump. And again, don't mean to throw anybody under the bus, because this is I've only had this for 5 minutes, the same as everybody else. So.
Yeah. So thank you. Look, I'm not intricately familiar with these properties, but I do know some properties in Emerald Glen. So these particular properties don't pay stormwater, they don't pay for water, and they don't pay for wastewater, but they do pay a community facilities charge, which is a fixed charge, and so that has gone up. It reflects the increased costs to our community facilities. They pay a district-wide roading charge, which has had an increase because of depreciation. Those properties, whilst they don't benefit from the three waters, they do benefit from the district-wide roads. They can access our libraries, they can access our swimming pools, they can access our halls. They also have they also pay a Paikakariki Community Board community rate. So those are the rates that some of these properties will pay, particularly in Paikakariki. But as I said, the community facilities charge has gone up quite a bit, as has the district-wide roading charge. It also depends on where these properties sit with their new revaluations compared to the average. So these are larger properties. We will find that what has impacted the rates increase on these particular properties is the uplift in the land value. These properties will have large land value. So land value has gone up across the district. So that does impact. So we have rates that are applied. It's a rate in the dollar land value, it's a rate in the dollar capital value, and there's fixed charges. So that will be impacting these particular properties.
Great.
Yeah, I just want clarification. That's cool.
Now we'll move on to the report.
So thank you. It's probably not wise to just take the report as read. It's a big report. What this report is seeking council to do today is to vote on what it consulted on. So it consulted on 3 change proposals. Each change proposal had a number of options. We've had submissions, we've had hearings. Those submissions had funding requests. So what we have, what this report has sought to do is to report back to council the results of those submissions. It has officer recommendations. These are decisions for you to vote on. Why are we doing this today is that the long-term plan document needs to be reproduced. It goes to auditors ideally tomorrow. If not tomorrow, it goes to auditors on Monday, and it is subject to the OAG's review and audit. We will be coming back on the 27th of June. So point of clarification, we have a spreadsheet that we can put on the table. We have recommendations that's for you to vote on. You may change those recommendations, and we can actually make the adjustments on screen so that you can see the rates revenue increase at the bottom. I think one of the things that is not misleading, but we call it an average rates increase, whether it's 17%, 15%, 12%, 5%, it's not an average rates increase. What that actual number reflects is the increase in the total rates revenue from one year to the next, less growth. That's what it is. When you start to put our rates tool calculator, as we've seen in the submission, it depends on the characteristics of your property. It depends on your capital value. It depends on your land value. We've said that our rates are a blunt tool. There's no such thing as an average rates increase, but it's how we're saying that our rates revenue has gone up by 17% after growth, and it'll be different to properties. So it sets out the order of this paper reflects the order of the questions in the consultation document. It is seeking you to make decisions on each of those options, and what will come out at the bottom will be the increase in the rates revenue after growth. And it's probably appropriate to go step by step through the report.
Sure.
Okay. So if we go step by step through the report, the first recommendation is obviously to receive and note the report. We've had a look at the submissions, and of the submissions we received, more people that submitted supported funding the 4.7 million operating cost shortfall through rates. That's the first recommendation B to consider.
Okay, so we're taking this a little chunk at a time. So the first thing, I might just get a mover and a seconder for A to get that out of the way. Moved by Councillor Warwick, seconded, that's just receiving the report, seconded by Councillor Wilson. All in favour? Aye, that's carried. So then we move on to B, which is the recommendation from staff is to rates fund the 4.7 million operating cost, but I've had notice of an alternative motion from the Deputy Mayor, so I'll let
Thank you.
let him present that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to
So
propose...
can we have it on the screen? Is that possible? The alternate motion that was sent through from the Deputy Mayor. Just while that happens, it's quite important that we land either the option that's about to go on the screen or the option that's in our papers today, so that staff can go away and prepare a long-term plan for us. If we don't manage to land either of those options, we've got a bit of a tricky situation on our hands. So just, I'd really appreciate your pragmatic support today around the table as we make these difficult decisions. You can probably introduce it.
Shall I introduce this? So thank you, Madam Chair. I note that the submissions that we have received, as Mark has pointed out in regards to proposal number 1 in the consultation document, the submissions we have received show a quite sizable portion of the 219 that were noted as having given an opinion on this proposal. 219 people, 60% of them approximately, were in support of debt funding. Having said that, my conversations that I've had across this community and that I read through a majority of this, what I would consider the majority of the submitters that we've received submissions from, and the communications I've had in other spaces around this community over the last, probably since we started talking about 17%, is that I feel that the feeling in our community is that 17 is unaffordable. And so I've heard that. I'm also aware that that we would to reduce that to our other option of 12%, we would have to debt fund that 4.7 million, which will increase some OPEX costs over the next few years until we're able to claw back and repay that 4.7 that we are borrowing. But in this time of a cost of living crisis, I think I feel more comfortable about spreading the cost of this 4.7 million over a period of time, which is yet to be determined because we'll need to get staff advice on what that would look like. But to spread it out over more than just a 1 year bang is going to be easier on our community. So that's why I'm putting this this alternate motion for recommendation B on the table. I would also like to signal that we need to have a conversation in future around the 5% affordability guideline that we use. And I also would like to signal that we need to continue to put pressure on central government for more funding to local councils and to territorial authorities. If we go with the 17%, we lose some of the leverage that I think we could have if we went with 12 with central government to increase their funding, or at least to have a decent conversation with us. So that is sort of the background of my introduction to this alternate motion, which is now on the screen, and I'm happy to read it out as our alternate motion, that the council does not rate fund the $4.7 million operating cost shortfall for the Three Waters services, noting its preference previously was to debt fund the shortfall. So that's my introduction. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I'll now
I'll second
invite-
that motion, Madam Chair.
Yeah, so, okay, so that's been moved and seconded, but I'm still going to allow some questions on it, of course, because we can ask questions at any time. So I think we'll have a period now of questions, and then I'll signal when we're going to move into debate. But questions can also be asked at any time. Councillor Wilson?
Okay, so yeah, just as a question, not a statement here. I'm interested to know what the consequences of shifting to this are. Obviously, it would entail a lesser rate rise, but I'm interested in what the downside consequences will be, because there will be some. The extra cost, what would be the net extra cost of borrowing, for instance, of that money? Because we had this same or a similar discussion about borrowing for depreciation last time. So just wondering if we can find out, do we know what the debt cost would be adding that in?
Yep. Mark?
So, thank you. Through you, Your Worship. So effectively, you're taking $4.7 million out of the rates revenue requirement, so there's a reduction of 5.18, but you're borrowing effectively $4.7 million from the start of the rating year. So at an assumed interest rate of 4.67%, that is going to incur additional interest of $221,000, which is an uplift of 0.24%. So a rates increase will certainly go down, but you do have a consequential interest increase. Yeah. So we have a table that we can put on. It's obviously the same recommendations, which includes the fees and charges. But if you did that, can you show me the bottom, please, Cheryl? If you did that and were consistent with everything else in the report, and this will change throughout the meeting, your rates revenue increase after growth falls to 11.81%. That includes the additional interest, taking the 4.7 out. Yeah. And sorry, that number there we'll keep referring back to because it'll change.
And just a supplementary question to that. So some of those properties that are currently getting, like say it's going to be a 24% or whatever that is, correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's a proportionality thing here, they will still be in the significantly higher than that average 11% anyway, right?
Yeah. So look, the general rule of thumb is there's two factors that are impacting what people are paying in terms of rates. Number one, it's the uplift in the value of their properties. So if their uplift is higher than the average, they potentially could pay more rates, and the council is increasing the total rates revenue. So you're increasing your rates revenue. Those that are above the average will pay more.
So I'm interested in the impact on rates in following years. So in C, we have a staff recommendation that we apply an average rate increase of 6% per year for following years. Would we still be able to achieve that if we approve this proposal today?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. So if you applied a 6% years 2 onwards, effectively it's going to slow down. It's going to slow down the rate of debt repayment. So you would still, years 2 onwards is closing the depreciation funding gap, and it's starting to retire the debt that we think we're going to have at the end of year 1. If we increase our debt by $4.7 million, it'll slow us down. So we know we'll see a significant impact in year 7. That'll be shifted to year 8 because we're going to have more debt. So if you do apply the cap of 6%, we just won't pay down our debt as quickly, and we won't be able to, if we still have the 3 waters, who knows? Well, if you still have the 3 waters, we won't be able to. Our plan in year 2 is to fully fund depreciation through rates and to retire debt. We won't be able to do that in year 1 by taking $4.7 million of debt now. We'll need to address the 4.7, and we'll be able to close some of that non-funded depreciation. So our glide path to reducing our debt will be slower than what the financial strategy is saying.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cooper?
A very good question. It was actually what I was thinking as well. So just correct me if I'm wrong. So even if, say, in 12 months' time through the annual plan process, we said to the CE, we want you to squeeze the budget even more and find, say, $500 or $1 million of savings through however the CE decides to do it. It may be reduction of services, it may be reduction in staffing numbers, but maintaining service. That's still on our strategic plan. That won't affect our 6% a year going forward. It'll just affect the debt in the outer years, because we're locking in 6% regardless of 1% inflation, 40%, and we're locking in 6%. So we're actually talking the outer years of debt, not future 6%.
So the financial strategy is setting a range of rates increases. Currently, it's saying the financial strategy from years 2 to years 10, it's between 6 and 8%, and the consultation document set out the impacts of 8, 7, 6, and the preference was 7. That average rates increase is accounting for inflation. It's already factored in the debt that we're taking on for the CapEx, so it's factoring in rising debt to deliver the CapEx program. It's factoring inflation, personnel movement, so it's building in a lot of costs. But the 6%, so our non-funded depreciation is $3.5 million at the moment, and it will remain $3.5 million in year 1 of the long-term plan. Year 2, the 6% is closing that gap 100%. We will not be able to do that. So the 6% will slow things down. If the whole purpose of an annual plan is to review the budgets, but the financial strategy sets the parameters within which the council is expected to live within. This financial strategy may be slowed down, but it is certainly the financial strategy that you've adopted is about building future resilience for Kapiti.
Yep. So it slows it down. Yeah. Great. Thank you. I think that's my question.
Just had a question that sprang from that answer that I'd quite like to ask before I go to the Chief Executive. Would there be any potential impact on our credit rating if we slowed down our debt repayment and created a poll.
It depends. It depends on. It really would depend on by how much are we slowing down. At the moment, we've reduced our capital works program and we're retiring debt, and we're hoping to work with S&P Global to retain or strengthen our credit rating. As long as we're continuing to do that, if we increase our spend and take on more debt, then we can probably guarantee a downgrade on our credit rating. So the short answer is, if we took on $4.7 million of debt in year one, but we maintained the financial strategy to reduce the debt, to go hard, to cap at 6%, then that is a small slowing down of what we're trying to do. But we're still showing S&P Global we've taken $99 million out of the CapEx program. We've clawed it back to affordability and deliverability, and our financial strategy is to pay down debt. That should still land favourably. This proposal should not downgrade us in itself. But if we continue to increase costs and increase debt, it will. Eventually it will.
Yeah. I think the Chief Executive has something to add to the answer to my question that I asked.
Thank you, Worship. I did just want to clarify that with the what's being proposed is to take on an additional $4.7 million of debt per annum for the life of the long-term plan. So we really I just wanted to reconfirm that, and that is what is being proposed. That's what we set out in option 2. So it wasn't just a year one thing. It was about ongoing. So for the life of the plan, that's 47 million additional debt.
4.7.
Yeah, 47 million over 10 years.
Oh, right, yeah.
Of additional debt.
Gotcha. Can I? Yeah, and unless it's paid back, but paying back has a rates consequence as well. Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, just a really brief question in terms of if we were to debt fund, just some comment, I would appreciate some comment around the implications for intergenerational equity. If you can provide some more context to that, if we were to change what the recommendation in the paper is to the one that's amended.
Good question.
So the consultation document talks about intergenerational equity, and it says it's a fantastic theory. If we fully rates fund depreciation, we're halfway to achieving intergenerational equity. When we just refinance our debt and increase our debt, we're actually just pushing the burden of that debt repayment onto future ratepayers. So we actually, to actually achieve intergenerational equity, you're doing two things. You are fully funding depreciation and you have a debt repayment plan. So by taking on, the short answer to your question, by taking on more debt, we are doing what we're doing today. We're refinancing and increasing debt.
Councillor Wilson?
So my calculation, and again, I'm not always that good with numbers, but my calculation is that if we were to do this, we would be paying an additional $1.2 million over 5 years in interest, just in interest. And over a 10-year period, there would be $2.7 million worth of extra interest would be paid on this. This is assuming that we didn't do this again next year, and the year after, and the year after, and the year after, which would take us to, obviously, an interesting number. So my question is that, given that we're currently paying $171,000 a week in interest now, I'm interested in taking some advice here from people who work with numbers all the time about whether or not this is a fiscally responsible thing to do. because I was on the wrong side of the right argument last time, or was on the right side of the wrong argument, where we agreed to debt fund depreciation. And at the time I thought that was a good idea. It was a terrible idea, actually. And so I think there was something to be learned from that, and hopefully we have. So I just am looking again at what are the downside consequences of, if our LTP was a budget, it would have been called the debt reduction budget. I think that was one of the biggest drivers of it, and this kind of seems to go against the flow. So I'm happy at some stage to take advice about that. But again, I realise that it's a political thing. Yeah, well, the question really is about.
You're stealing Lawrence's right of introduction.
Well, no, it really is just about how economically sustainable it is. And I understand the imperatives, I understand the drivers. Nobody's comfortable with 17%, but is it economically responsible to do it? That's my question.
Is it a rhetorical question or one that you want Mark to answer?
It's kind of rhetorical. I think it answers itself. But if anybody else wants to add in.
Okay, Martin, you had your light on. Do you have a question? No? All good? So Lawrence has already kind of introduced this a bit. We're being a bit loose with our standing orders today, but that's all good. So Lawrence, would you like to kick off and we'll all share our thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, I've already, I guess, introed it. I will just comment on a couple of things that were raised in the questions. The first one was related to, if we do this now, then we'll continue to push out 4.7 for the next 10 years. I'm happy if we add the words in year one into that motion, so that we borrow in year one and then we look for the annual plan year two to consult around that, so that we can be clear on repayment down. Anyway, so for me, again, I'll come back to, this is about affordability for our community and softening the blow of what we all know is hard times for all of us. And I think the timing of putting 17% in when our community is already struggling is why I'm proposing this drop to 12 or 11.81 if you look at the spreadsheet that was said. The other thing is, I still think we have a lot of uncertainty in the Three Waters space around what central government will do. This does give us room to push that out and hopefully have a solution that reduces our OPEX costs related to Three Waters over the longer term. So those are just my added extra points around this particular alternate motion. Thank you.
I'll go to Martin.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I
Councillor Halliday, sorry.
Support this motion. 17% is not doable for me. I have concerns around the 5% threshold, which I've expressed. This is not the ideal solution, I fully admit that. But we've created what I would call an empowered environment, and I've seen very, very good work done in this space, this trinium. I would like to think I have confidence in the ability to delve into things a bit more in the coming 12 months. And I don't know what that will look like or where we will end up, but I would like a bit of breathing space with regards to looking at this a bit harder. That's why I support this recommendation. For me, it's a 1-year reprieve and nothing more than that, because the decision, some would call it maybe kicking the can down the road, but I've heard the words agility. I've heard we've moved our financial strategy from being just working within the 1 financial year to really working within 3, so that we can maximise opportunity, we can maximise how we run our business, which I think was sensible, and I fully supported it. I can stomach 12%, but I don't like it. I still don't like it. We came into the last long-term plan doing a growth strategy, and we were promised that it would be about 3.5% this time. that ain't the case. And there's all right. I've got a list this long with regards to the reasons why. I get that. So whether we need to start thinking outside the box, looking at other opportunities, I don't know. But what I do want is more time to focus on this. I would even put the suggestion in that we need to modify our committee structure to bring in something that looks at this as an issue, and we can focus on it. But that's a discussion for the table on the other side of this conversation. That's my view on this. I'll be supporting this motion, just indicating that.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Martin actually. So no one likes debt. 17% is completely unpalatable to me. I think this gives us the breathing space, to come back to the table, and whether that be as a council to look at more savings and squeeze our budget as much as the C's done a good job. For us to direct him to go back and squeeze it some more, so that we can, if we're going to sit on 6% going forward for the next 10 years, then we can actually make that 6% and come in below it. So it gives us 12 months to have a really good discussion. I'm not sure our table, the councillors, have been robust enough in terms of squeezing our budget. I know that the paid staff have done a fantastic job in the CapEx and OpEx, but I'm just questioning whether we as councillors have done enough. And I think this gives us the 12 months or a bit of space to have those robust discussions around service level, around, are we prepared to lose service level to meet these budgets, or, So I'm of mind to give us that breathing space and get it down to that 11.8, 11.9, 12%. Yep, so that's sort of signaling where I want to go, but happy to listen to others on it.
Councillor Handford.
Yeah, I'm happy to be that other voice. I'm planning to vote against this recommendation, or the amended recommendation. Frankly, because I think the intergenerational equity point can't be overlooked, and I feel personally like that's really important. When we went out to the community too and consulted on rates funding that $4.7 million shortfall, we actually had a majority of our community come back and say, just do it, just put this extra 5% on us now, so that we don't have to spread the cost of servicing that debt over the life of the long-term plan. So I feel like also when I look at the submissions from the Paikakiriki and the Raumati part of the district, and we also saw quite a large portion of people, again, support option one. So I feel quite comfortable in considering that if we take this cost on now, then maybe we're just front-footing a challenge which will always be present for us in local government. And I just feel like if we keep trying to find what we feel like is a solution in the moment, it'll actually come back to bring us bigger challenges. So I'm not in support of the amended recommendation.
Yeah, I might chip in there and say that I support Councillor Handford's comments. We've gone through a submission process. We've asked people, we've given them two options, and to me, this written submissions and the oral submissions both strongly came back not wanting us to fund operating expenses through debt. They just clearly, to me, didn't want it. The majority of people. So I know it's really hard to go out with that 17% figure, but I'm not wanting to create what we call a bow wave effect, where you have financial ramifications in future years that then other people have to deal with. There's good reasons why the cost has gone up this year. As Martin said, the list is as long as your arm, including massive increases in construction costs and costs of delivering our services and maintaining our assets. And I don't think we can bury our head in the sand and ignore that. And I don't think our community wants us to bury our heads in the sand and ignore that. That's not what I heard when I was sitting here listening to submissions. So while that figure is very tempting, I'm not willing to risk unforeseen consequences further down the track by making this move today. I really respect the suggestion, and I think it's something we needed to discuss properly and consider today. So I'm grateful to the Deputy Mayor for putting it on the table. I'll go to Councillor Cofford.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. No, I'm sort of off the view that capital expenditure, especially infrastructure, is benefited by future generations.
Oh, hang on a minute. Do you want to press your... Sorry. Something happened? Maybe your battery's run out or something.
Been ghosted.
No.
Oh no.
There's a message in that. Yeah, I think you...
Maybe start again.
Yeah, okay.
For the record.
No, I'd recommend the recommendation on the basis that I've always been off the view that capital expenditure for things like infrastructure and that is benefited by future generations. Although it's scary that we're funding depreciation with loans and that's pretty frightening. But I think that I don't think we should be in too much of a rush under the circumstances to pay off debt. I think perhaps in year two we do look at savings, we review it, but just take the edge off the 17%. I think get back to 12% this time around and review it and look at savings and development levies, things like that. Would that be fair?
Whatever you say is fair. This is a debate. Councillor Warwick?
Well, this is really hard, but I don't think we should put it off because debt is debt. We just keep paying interest, and unfortunately that's what's happened for probably 30 years in most, councils. We've put it off and we've increased the rates. And if we do a one-off, get rid of that debt, I think we still need to look at where we actually look at what we're spending. But the flip side is that if councils all of a sudden come up with they were going to do 20% or 17%, and then they go back to 12 or 10 because they're going to put off and increase their debt, central government is just going to look and say, well, there you go, you made savings. You didn't put the rates up that much. To me, it gets them off the hook in a way. And our community needs to start knocking on their door as well with us and saying the model is broken. We need to change something because we can't afford what we have to do. That's my view. I just don't want to pay more interest on a debt. So I would vote for the 17%, even though I'm going to struggle to pay it too, like most of us around here.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I was in two minds about this. I understand the arguments in favour. We did hear from submitters during the process that the reason they suggested debt funding is because of the uncertainty at central government level around their policies on Three Waters. I think it's dangerous to predicate policy based on that, as pretty much every council in the country did for the last 6 years. So I wouldn't be relying on that. You have to rely on what it actually is. And I do understand that it would obviously lessen the rates impact for a number of people. However, on the other side of that, I'm not in favour of enriching the financial sector. I think 4.6% interest now is not necessarily going to be 4.6% going forward, so we do our calculations based on what it is now, but ask anybody who bought a house in the last 2 or 3 years how they feel about where interest rates might go. Some of them have been massively impacted just in the value of their property and the cost, yada yada. So there's that. I'm with Sophie on the pushing debt onto future generations. I'm just certainly not in favour of that. We've already done that as a country by not taxing the rich, and so we've passed the costs on to future generations largely, and to those who can least afford it. The 17% is a big number, I'll agree, but it's actually one of the lowest in the region. There are an enormous number of the 72 TAs in New Zealand who have rates increases significantly more than this. So people who sort of point at this organisation and go, "Wow, you're just, you're a bloated bureaucracy, etc." They would have to make that argument for pretty much every council in the country, and I don't think you can do that. I don't think it's fair to do that. This council has already agreed to a 1/3 cut in its capex. That's huge. I mean, that is really, really significant. We've already climbed into, the CE has climbed into the organisation and I think already delivered a pretty lean machine. There might be stuff that people can debate, but that work is being done. And like I say, the whole country is facing this problem this year. And aside from all of those arguments, the one thing I'm never in favour of, and that is borrowing to pay for operational expenditure. Borrowing and debt is really about capex, because it spreads the value, it spreads the load, and it spreads the cost. Borrowing for OPEX is a bit like borrowing money from the bank to replace your furniture, at an interest rate that you can't afford. Anyway, that's my take.
Councillor Spires.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I will be supporting this motion, and I think that this council needs to get back to central government to front up, because our rates is actually a tax. And we need more support from central government, because we've been mucked around with the three waters to start with. And I'm sitting here supporting our vulnerable families in our community who cannot pay a 17% pay rise. They're trying to put food on the table for their children. So I just cannot do it. That's all.
Mr. Larissy, did any of your submissions comment on this option?
No, I left all of those options blank on my submissions.
Great, just checking.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, sure, no, good question. I did think actually I should clarify that, so thank you. Thanks, Kathy. I think that's a really important voice, our people on the ground here. I stood for election the first time and I said people first. And so an issue like this, I'm thinking, how does this affect the people, our people? A basic principle of business is cash flow is king. And if you don't learn that in business, you don't survive. And that really is about, if you can't afford it, you can't do it. At the moment, we're seeing record levels of liquidations in businesses. We're seeing massive cuts in public services. We're seeing people under pressures in their finances that are huge. And that's real. We were talking food on the table. If you were asking me my opinion, and I don't have to vote, but if you were going to ask me my opinion, I would say, based on the cash flow argument in this current environment, the lower rates makes a big difference to people every week in terms of their food on the table. But imagine my surprise when I saw the results of the survey where we specifically asked our people this very question, and I think it was a good point to raise, Councillor Handford, that the numbers came up a majority saying they support higher rates for lower debt. And I think that should really speak to us. My opinion, personally, is we should lower the rates to ease people's pressure. But when our people themselves are saying we'll accept higher rates so that we're not paying all that ballooning debt, that kind of tells me something. So my recommendation to our councillors would be take that voice on board, because that's the voice of our people. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more lights, so I'll go to Deputy Mayor for a right of reply.
I think, thank you, Madam Mayor, and to all my fellow members around the council for the considered opinion and from my perspective, I think this is probably the hardest decision that we will make in this triennium. And there's a lot of the rest of this LTP that flow off this one decision, really, without saying, we've still got to adopt the LTP in June. So there's room for more debate potentially as we move forward. But for me, if I can talk to the things, probably the most important things for me is the people side of it. As has already been mentioned, I know families that are already in strife and struggling. And this is my opportunity, I guess, to be able to offer some sort of hope, I guess, when it isn't. And so that's why I've put this in here. I agree that in an ideal world, we pay for OPEX out of rates. But there are moments, and this has happened in the past for this council, where there is a bigger purpose and a bigger heart involved, and sometimes you just have to borrow to ensure that you're able to fulfill the vision, that you have the bigger purpose, the longer term goal than just a year or 2 years or whatever. And I understand council has way more flexibility in our budgets because of the size of them than families do, where they're struggling to put food on tables, pay bills, run a company in this difficult time. And so I guess what I'm asking is that we vote in this situation for those who maybe don't have a voice and who were not heard in our consultation period. Because I can guarantee you that there are a lot of families in our community that did not have the time to put in, and if they did, they would not have said, borrow more so that I pay more, because for them cash flow is the key issue. They don't have ability, and so we didn't hear their voice through the submissions process. And I want to implore us as a council to listen, to hear the voice of the most vulnerable who would say, I can't afford another $20 a week on my cash flow because I'm already skint. So I'd like to implore us to vote for this recommendation that I've put on the table. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to put that to the vote. As I think we're a bit split around the table on this one. When you vote, could you raise your hand so that we can see who's voted, so we don't have to necessarily call a division? So all in favour, say aye and raise your hand, please. Right, and against? No. So that's carried. Does anybody want to call a division? Anybody want to be mean? So we're calling a division, Councillor Wilson? Yep. So all in favour, please raise your hand. I'll read them out and you can write them down, maybe. Do you want to read them out? Sorry, in favour we have Councillor Kirby, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Halliday. This pen isn't working. This pen's not working. Councillor Coford, Councillor Spires, and against we have the Mayor, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Warwick, and Councillor Handford. And that's carried. That's harder than it looks, doing that. Great, okay, so that's option B taken care of. In terms of the suggestion of this year or following years, I think we leave the wording as it is for now, and we don't need any further things. So we did have a suggestion for another motion around this, which was to ask council staff to better publicise our opportunities for rates relief and rates rebate. So that's an additional recommendation. Yeah, so let's deal with that after tea. Okay, so we're on recommendation C. Applies an average rates increase of 6% per year from 25-26 to 23 to 2033-34. And I'm just wanting to double confirm with staff that the motion that we just passed in B doesn't impact on our ability to carry through with recommendation C.
Yes, it does.
Are we still building a resilient future and reducing debt?
Thank you.
Just a simple question.
Thank you, Madam. So, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, the financial strategy of the reality of the situation is the financial strategy of 8, 7, and 6 was built off a rates revenue increase of 17%. So, with the 17%, you were able to go to 7% years 2 to 10. You were able to fully fund depreciation. You were able to absorb the impacts of inflation, plus take on the debt to do the CapEx program and retire debt. So the question is, are you still able to build a resilient future for Kapiti? Not as fast. And the resolution that you've just passed is a shortfall of $4.7 million that you've taken on debt in year 1, and it's still going to be there in years 2 to 10. And you have to decide how to plug that hole in years 10 and year 2. So it has slowed down the financial strategy because you don't have that 17% increase in rates revenue.
I think we all understand that. What I'm wanting to know is, can we still move C as it stands? Or do we need to rethink that? We can? We can. It's possible to still achieve C? It's possible to still achieve it, right? That's 6%. Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking for a mover. Or any questions first? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, there is a question, and you partly answered it, but I guess the bigger question is, does what's just been moved require, because of the consultation process with the LTP, and because people came back largely and said, reduce your debt, and council's we've listened to the people, and council's just voted to increase the debt, does C, which was also part of the consultation document, which people wanted us to reduce debt, but working on the assumption that we weren't going to have to reduce debt by reducing the debt that we've just increased. So where does that leave us in that regard? Do we have to go back to, would it be responsible to go back to the public? I mean, an LTP process is a fairly definitive thing, but so will the public say, well, actually, you did an LTP consultation is different than some of the consultations that we've done that aren't binding, they're not polls, they're not those sorts of things. But LTP consultation, as everybody will be aware, is a little more binding. So I just wonder where that leaves us in terms of the hard messaging that came from the public. And are we able, so we just move ahead, or how does that look? And one more question in relation to this too. The motion that was just passed, I couldn't speak for the two councillors who aren't here today, but anecdotally I would have thought that it would have turned it over. So what happens next week when those two councillors are back at the table?
Yeah, that has been preying on my mind as we sit here today, Councillor Wilson. It's a very good point.
And so I just wonder where that leaves us as a council, and I'm kind of concerned about the reputational damage that can happen when you yo-yo on stuff. but it's for wiser people than me to consider this now. I merely raised the question.
Yeah, so clearly with option C, I've just got one more question about it. So if we decide to go for a higher rate in future years, that would help us plug that hole, wouldn't it, that we've just created?
Yes.
We could pay it off. We could then kind of claw back a bit of our intention to reduce debt. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Who's got a light on?
do.
Darren.
I thought I might just have a go at the question. So option C, 6% year two. So Mark and I are both going to have a look at this. It makes it, the decision that has just been made means that the reduction of the need to borrow will take longer before we are then able to start to reduce our debt, right? So that has an impact on the balance sheet. You will see debt increasing for a longer period before you start to see it reducing. But that's the risk that we take on. That's the decisions that are made at this table. The other piece, Councillor Wilson, in relation to those who aren't here, is yet to be determined. So let's see how that goes, right? But in relation to what does year two look like, you know, we've got some levels in there at a higher and lower end, and we would have seen that through last year's annual plan. So whilst we are suggesting an average rate increase of 6% for year two, it does have implication. But you have to weigh up the financial and the social. So, Mark, do you want to add any technical stuff?
No, you go.
Want me to?
You go.
So thank you, Madam Mayor. So the outcome of today is to go through the recommendations and come up with a draft rates revenue increase. The team will go away and they will use that to calculate the rate in the dollar for the rates. And on the 27th of June, the council will sit around the table and we'll vote on a long-term plan, and you must adopt a long-term plan before you set rates. If you adopt a long-term plan subject to further change, then we can't set the rates. So the answer to your question is you can still make changes. Our preference is you don't. Our preference is you decide today and you hold that line. But if on the day, on 27th of June, if you change something, you adopt the LTP subject to a change, we go away and we calculate the rates and we set the rates at a later date. You know, that's in keeping with legislation, and just the recommendation in this paper reflected what the submission said, but the options that you did consult on were 8, 7, 6 with a preference for 7.
Councillor Kirby, the Deputy Mayor.
Yes. I'm assured before we voted on the previous motion that my understanding was that we could hold the 6. That was what I heard from staff prior to the previous motion. So why wouldn't we move this motion as it currently stands on that advice previously? So I'm happy to move this motion as it stands.
Just hold that thought. Are you actually moving it, or are you signalling that you're going to? Because we're still kind of asking questions. Yeah, I'd prefer not to do what we did last time. We'll just kind of get to the end of questions, and then I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for a motion. Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, look, I'm actually just asking for some clarity. 3 years ago, we had a long-term plan, which had different numbers for now, and we've changed that. So that shows me that in an annual plan process, things change. Is that correct? Yes. Yep. So we have 6% all the way through, but in 5 years' time, that whole equation might change, and that'll be the decision for the table at that time. Same, but even next year could be the same thing. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you very much.
Councillor Cooper?
Yeah, very good point, Martin. And, you know, we're talking like we don't have control over our own existence. So if I just look at, excuse me, I'll put my glasses on. If I look at the older person's housing, you know, there's talk yet to be decided that we gift that into a trust. But on a $21 million asset, if we sell that at $2 million, we've immediately halved our shortfall. If we that $21 million asset goes into a chip at $4 million, and the chip borrows for it, and then we're happy days. So the CE is an ingenious and intelligent man who let the record show. So you know, I just think we have got control over our own destinies on this. And as I said before, if the table wants to squeeze, the table should squeeze. And that might hurt badly. But we have actually got control over this. You know, we're not bystanders, and the boss is in the bystander, and the council is in the bystander.
Is there a question in there? There doesn't have to be.
Yes.
Don't
Well, it's
don't want a
yeah.
question for the sake of a question, but just be careful, guys. We're just asking questions.
Yep.
then
So
we're gonna have a
my
bit of
question
a debate.
was, and I did actually have a question before I started turning into Nigel.
Okay. Let's
So my
keep it
question is,
rolling on.
if we vote on C at 6%, it's up to the boss to deliver. Is that correct? Yes or no is fine. If we vote C through at 6% as a council, then it's up to the C to deliver that 6%. That's my understanding. And if he doesn't, that's
Who should answer that question?
Oh, probably
I would
the boss.
just say
See?
yes.
Yes or no is fine. Yes. Okay, thank you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Cam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given with even with the 17%, we weren't financially funding some places such as the CAB and Te Arakoroa, etc. 12% makes life harder. Just wanting to put Mark on the spot with some tissue paper. If we were to try to fund the shortfall of that 5% from year 1 and years 2 and 3, what would the rates increases need to look like for years 2 and 3? So rather than doing 6%, would it be, 9% and 7% and then back down to 6? Like, is there an option to actually try and, fund that shortfall over the term of that 3-year LTP? And I know you can't be exact, but
Yeah, thank you.
You've got to be a handle than say me.
Yeah, thank you. Look,
Yeah, the reality is you can smooth anything over time, so it depends on how fast. So if you wanted to, if we use simple numbers, the 4.7 is 5% rate increase, and if you wanted to claw that back over 2 years, year 2 would be 6% plus 2.5. If you wanted to, then year 3 would be 6% for 2.5. At a very basic level, if you wanted to claw it back over 3 years, but that's kind of how it works. So the 6% in years 2 onwards hasn't accounted for this new debt at all. So if it needs to be managed within, it needs to be managed within. But the 6% has not accounted for the extra 5. Yeah, 6% is accounted for. The 6% is an increase from the 17% to absorb those cost increases that come through every year with depreciation and inflation. It's delivering the CapEx program and it's starting to reduce debt. So It would need, if you were going to claw it back over 2 years, it would need to go to 8.5% in year two.
Yeah, I would have thought it would have been slightly more because of the fact of the increased cost of debt that you're wearing from that. So therefore, it wouldn't be 5% over those 2 years. It might be 6, like a 3 and a 3.
Yeah, so it's $221,000. So you'd pay on the $5 million debt, or 4.7 million, you'd pay 221,000.
Yeah.
And so you'd pay, depending on how fast, you'd pay another 221,000 the following year, which is, I think it's 0.02%.
Okay,
So I'm trying not to be
yeah.
specific. So what we've established is that by borrowing the 4.7 in year one, there is $221,000 of interest that's going to hit, and that will hit year two as well.
Okay, so it would be closer to like 2.6 and 2.6, just
Yes.
covering
Yes.
possible interest rate rises.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, which means effectively like $500,000 to be found from somewhere. And so, again, it just comes back to how genuine the LTP process is and keeping faith with that. When we went out to the public with a range of figures, they were predicated on a few things that were also in the plan, which explained why those numbers were there and what they meant. So they weren't just Disneyland numbers, they actually were based on something. When you add another $4.7 million to the debt in order to offer some rates relief, bearing in mind that a significant number of people said for them the primary thing was for this council to be financially responsible and get its debt down. So given that, and that we have just voted to do the opposite of that, one of the predicates was that in the out years that here was going to be a likely ceiling on the rates that you would be paying. So people were, prepared to, we'll live with that because it'll help us get to that debt repayment place, and then we'll carry on. And now what we're going to do, and one of the things that we didn't, and you could make the argument, say, oh well, you're not getting whacked so hard this year, but you'll get whacked a little bit more every year after. But part of that is what we didn't say to people when you were going to get that rates is you're also going to get some service cuts. And with respect to Comrade Cooper, you're right. We can say to the CEO, we want this place to look like Jenny Craig's been in charge, and you come back and you do all that, you make all those service cuts, but we didn't say to the public that's what was going to happen. Now, the CEO can make cuts, but they will ultimately be service cuts, and we haven't gone out and consulted with the public through the LTP. Are you in favour of service cuts, and which services do you think we should cut? And so whilst it is ultimately true that the delivery would be on the CE, it is still ultimately a political and a governance decision about what service cuts you would accept. They come back to this table, and the councillors then accept or reject those cuts. So, my concern is what the pushback might be against just how reputable the consultation. I think it was. I think we did it. I think it was a really good LTP consultation document. I think it was a robust document. I think the numbers were justified. But because we've made a significant change to it, I just wonder what the public response to that might be. So in order to support C, that was the predicate of the consultation document, which has now just been turned on its head. So I'm not quite sure where that leaves us. I was going to vote for C on the basis of what we consulted on and what the public came back and what we'd agreed to, but I can't vote for C if what I'm voting for are service cuts. Because I don't know what those service cuts would be. I don't know if I'd agree to them or not agree to them, but that's what effectively we are being asked to do.
So I think we're moving into debate. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. Shelley, Councillor Warwick.
Would you recommend that we modify C and change the rates, the 6% and the 7% on the wording that gives us the flexibility to be able to pay off that debt? So 6 to 8%, or should we change that percentage because that's not really going to work anymore? What would your...
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing that it's working and I'm kind of hearing that it's not. And I think that's a really good question. Would, if we moved 7% in C, would that help plug the hole that we've just created as a group? Because to me, you
Can I say
can't have
something?
it both ways.
Might help with this.
Yeah, Councillor Halliday?
Yep. We've agreed to borrow that money for 1 year, and we've got an annual plan next year. So at the moment, nothing's changed with regards to service for the next 12 months. Something might change after that, and I think, as the Mayor's pointed out, we might be going up for consultation of the next annual plan. I don't know. But to say that we're going to be cutting back on services straight away, that's not actually necessarily the case as such. And you're right, Nigel, we haven't consulted on that as such. There would have to be a process, and I dare say consultation around that as such. That was my understanding of things. Is that correct?
Is that correct? Where's what?
Well, I mean, the decisions will be made throughout.
Yeah, well, the
Yeah.
service levels stay the same for the next financial
Yes.
year. And
Yes, the
thereafter.
levels of service will stay the same for the next financial year. Yep.
Which is year one
Which is year one
of the
of the
long-term
LTP.
plan.
Yep.
The way I read the resolution you've just passed, you didn't say your debt funding for year one. Nowhere in that resolution does it say that.
Oh, sorry, that must be an assumption of word.
So
Yeah, this is the
so you need to think
the perils of.
about the resolution that you've just passed, because in my eyes, as the chief executive, you've just signed us up to 4.7 million per year for 10 years of debt. If that's not what you want to do, then you need to think long and hard. If I think about the annual plan, just answering the question about the annual plan, Your Worship, if you're asking us to do an SCP, a special consultative process, that will draw on resource. I can squeeze and squeeze and squeeze, but I'm not a magician.
Yeah.
And so I'll
yeah.
get to a point where I'll say, no, I can no longer do any more for this council or this community. And so the decisions we are making here, this is not an annual plan conversation. This is a long-term plan, which we do for 10 years, and we look at it every 3 years. And we've been really clear as officers in the start of this process that it is a long-term plan process, not an annual plan that we are doing here. And so we need to think hard about our decisions. And I would ask respectfully that you think about what it is that you want me to do and what you want staff to do for the community.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, so it's just a question as much for me as it is for the people out there. So the long-term plan sets the high-level strategy for the next 10 years, and then it's the annual plans that does the enacting, does the grunt work to meet the strategy. That's right, eh?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Oh, so the LTP is the high level, the strategy for the next 10 years, our strategy, yes. and the big, the big tickets. And then the annual plan is the grunt work that enacts the strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the heavy lifting's done in the annual plan work, essentially to meet the strategic intent of the LTP.
Well, the heavy lifting is actually done in the long-term plan. The annual plan, the intention of the annual plan, things do change. You set a 10-year plan, things change. So it's the annual plan, the intention behind the annual plan is to make some small changes. If you make some large changes, you're consulting. You're in the SCP process. The intention when we set a long-term plan is we spend so much work, time and effort that we try and set a plan that we can stick to. And legislation requires that you must, when you set an annual plan, you must set out in the annual plan the differences between the annual plan and the long-term plan and why.
Great.
Our preference is to set a long-term plan, make some small adjustments when they're absolutely necessary and stick to it, and not be in a SCP process every year.
Yeah. That's a very good point. So I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this 4.7 each year. To me, we're creating a $4.7 million hole with the decision that we just made. That hole remains the same. We don't draw down another $4.7 million each year, right? Because we wouldn't have been able to we would have had to do that in any case, or we would have had to have the extra rates next year and the year after and the year after and the year after. It was always a 1 year. It was always a 1 year thing, and it still is, as per the consultation document. That's the way I'm seeing it. I'm not sure if I've got that right. Have I got that right?
So, no.
It's not making so
yeah.
whatever we
Yep.
decided
Yep.
was this year. You know, we were going to rates fund the $4.7 million this year.
Mm-hmm.
Then were we going to rates fund it next year and the year after and the year after and the year
Yes.
after?
Yes. So,
And that was within the 6%.
yes. Yes. So if I can explain.
Yeah.
The,
Please do.
The new resolution that you've just passed says you consulted. There is $4.7 million of costs that are hitting the three waters in year 1, in year 2, in year 3, all the way to year 10. And so we're saying, how are you going to fund that shortfall? See, in the consultation document, it asked ratepayers, do you want to fund that shortfall by rates or by debt? And the options that were set out in the consultation document, if you fund it by rates in year 1, you are rate funding that 4.7 million, and then the next year there's an increase in rates revenue. So you've captured that 4.7 and you're building. So you've captured it once. If you look at the table in the consultation document, if you fund it by debt in year 1, you've still got those costs that you are borrowing. So you are funding the shortfall through debt in year 1. In year 2, you've still got those costs sitting there. Your rates revenue won't cover it, and you covered it the prior year by borrowing. It's exactly the same as the better off funding. You're using better off funding of $4.7 million in year 1 that you won't have in year 2. So you've got a funding shortfall. So the intention may have been borrow $4.7 million in year 1, but the resolution doesn't say how you're going to fix it. The 6%, the 7% and the 8% financial strategy is building on closing that gap in year 1. So what we've been saying to you is you can set 6%, 7%, 8%, you've still got that funding shortfall, and it could be levels of service. So that shortfall of $4.7 million, if you fix it by debt in year 1, you'll have to fix it by debt in year 2, or you're increasing rates, or you're doing something else. So it doesn't say in that resolution in year 2. What we've said to you that the financial strategy is looking to reduce debt. It's going to be a lot slower. It hasn't accounted for 4.7. You consulted on, do we fund the shortfall through debt, and it's $4.7 million year on year, and it shows that's where we get the $47 million. It shows the interest, but if there's a shortfall, those costs are there year on year.
Councillor Warwick.
So, what would you recommend we increase year 2 and 3 rates to cover this hole if we were to change that C?
Look, that's a really tough question. So we've worked with councillors, we've been on the journey, we've done the workshops, we've done a consultation document together. The preferred option around this table was 17%. The preferred option was 7% from years 2 onwards. We've looked at the submissions, we've heard hearings, and our recommendations are in the report.
Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, again, I struggle with maths from time to time, but I think we're being a little bit generous on the 4.6% over the next 10 years. Economic forecasting around the world would suggest that we're in a much better space than we're likely to be. At 6%, we would be talking about turning that 4.7 would turn into 8.5 million over, which is a $3.8 million interest cost spread over a 10-year period, which is $380,000 a year. The Mark is 100% correct, as is Darren, and that the just borrowing it doesn't make the problem go away.
Are you asking a question, or are you going?
Well, yeah, the question
planning to
would
move
be
something?
if we wanted to return to the position that we undertook to ratepayers, and say next year we decided let's deal with this as we're going to this year. So we decided to do that next year. Presumably, you would then take 7% or say 8%, add on another 4.7% plus the interest, maybe say 5%, add that on top of that to get rid of that debt. Otherwise, you're doing exactly what has been said, and in 10 years' time, we will have landed ratepayers with a $3.8 million debt and still have the cost. It just keeps going forever.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense economically.
So,
Great question. Sorry.
did you want to move a motion, Councillor Kirby?
I actually have a question, and this is showing my own lack of understanding in this space. Mark, you said before that under the 6% for year 2, that the $4.7 million cost that we would have paid this year would be covered. In year 2, under the 6%.
So you've got a 6% increase in rates revenue, so that can be applied to the debt. So what our strategy is saying in year 2 is where we start to close the $3.5 million funding, the depreciation funding gap. So the 6% can cover some of that, and we've said it'll slow down. It'll slow down. We won't be able to close the depreciation funding gap. It'll be going towards most of that 4.7. It may not cover all our inflationary increases. The 6% in year 2 is closing the 3.5 gap, plus it's absorbing the inflation. So now it's having to cover the 4.7 before we even start. So it pushes everything out.
I get that.
Yep.
I'm just trying to.
Yep.
The buckets don't seem to line up for me. The other question for me, when we went out with 2 options, 12% or 17%, were they real options or not?
Those were real options.
So all we've done with this motion before was we chose one of the options that we consulted on.
Yes. So you have voted on one of the options.
Yep.
Yep. Not the preferred option, and the financial strategy reflected the preferred option.
Okay. So the consultation document, and I'm probably entering into debate with Councillor Wilson here, because he is suggesting that the consultation document, our preference was 17, and if we were wise, we would have always chosen that, even if the consultation had come back and said everyone wanted 12. It's just convenient that the consultation came back and said it was 17, so that we could go for our preference. So that's an interesting thing for me. Just as an aside, I want some understanding. I'm happy to, if we want to move an amendment to this one and push us back to our preference of 7. And give us room to look at the numbers as we walk through this first year, heading to our annual plan for year 2.
Okay. I think that's helpful. Might provide a little bit of breathing space. Actually, to achieve what the if we were only planning to debt fund in the first year, though, we'd need to do quite a lot more than that. We would actually need to rates fund next year and plug the gap, or make a plan to do it over 2 to 3 years. And that would have more than a 1% rates impact. So I think actually the scenario which I think a lot of people maybe thought they were voting for, which was let's do this in the first year and it won't affect the 6% and we can just take longer, in actual fact, we are actually borrowing more and more and more each year, which was what the Chief Executive was trying to communicate to the table when I was allowing that time to ask questions.
Yep.
And I don't know that there's a full understanding of that. And if we're trying to soften the blow is still happening, right? So we can't soften the blow by doing something this year and then expecting everything to stay the same afterwards. So I'd welcome a change to recognise that. And I think we could do that today and move on. And then, you know, we do have another couple of weeks before we approve this long-term plan. So I'm in favour of now moving to a recommendation. If you want to move 7% for C. So we need to change that recommendation, C. So could we have it on the screen? If that's what you're planning to move, Councillor Kirby, I'd be happy to second that.
If it can get us moving forward.
Yeah.
What I've heard just leading into this is a lot of debate, not about this particular recommendation, but about the previous motion, which isn't helpful because the decision was made and voted on.
Councillor Warwick? Question.
The question is that 7% is not actually going to deliver what we need it to, is it? It's not. We have to increase it by more than 7% to actually be able to fund.
We don't know. Yeah, I think that's the figure
And
that
so
we...
if we put a motion today and then we change it, the community is going to go, we're a bunch of wallies, really. Are we better not to just leave it? It's the truth, because actually 7% is not going to cut it. That's what we've just heard. It's not going to cut it.
Madam, can I move the procedural motion?
Yeah, sure. Councillor Halliday has the
I'd
microphone.
like to move motion C as it stands, test this with the table and go from there.
Okay. Councillor Halliday has moved. We didn't actually move in second before, didn't we? So Councillor Halliday has moved C. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Coford. Right of introduction.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I'm quite comfortable that this recommendation stands as it is, based on officers' recommendations, bearing no reference to the previous decision before. I'm quite happy with that recommendation, happy to move it.
Any further debate? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I'm a wee bit vexed about this because I was going to completely support C, predicated on us supporting the correct motion that's been changed. Because we live in this fluid environment and a week in politics is a very long time, and when 2 planes have landed and people get off and have an opportunity to consider what we're going to do next week, I would still like to support the 6% because it makes sense. It made sense with the 17%. The 6% doesn't make sense with the 12% because it equals service cuts, which we don't know what they might be. And until we did know what they might be, and until we had an opportunity to talk to the public, so I think it would probably trigger a special consultative process, which is incredibly expensive and time consuming and all the rest of it. So I'm kind of in a, I don't know, I'm in a bit of a bind. I'm an optimist, obviously, so I think sanity will prevail, but it may not, in which case I'll have voted for something that I really don't agree with. So we'll see how it plays.
I really need to.
Councillor Handford?
Oh, I just agree with Councillor Wilson. I feel like now, not really sure where that's left us because, and as Councillor Warwick said, now again, it comes back to that intergenerational equity point, but also if we're thinking about our financial strategy being to build a resilient Kapiti and to stay true to paying down that debt and setting ourselves up for the future, it kind of just feels like, okay, now we're going to have to be super ad hoc with everything because we'll have to find ways of plugging gaps all over the show. So I agree. I'm kind of not really sure where to stand on this, but I would love to go for 6% as well, but can we? Yeah.
Councillor Warwick?
Are we able to revisit this when we've got more information if we chose to lay it on the table? It's work for the staff, but if we make a decision based on no information, we are going to trip ourselves up, I believe.
The Chief Executive. We do have a council meeting next week.
That's right. Thank you. So we've asked you to give us a steer so that we can go away, right, and finalise the document for the June council meeting when we bring this back and you make a decision as to what the final long-term plan will look like. So what we take away from today's decisions will influence what we come back to you with for the final sign-off in June, noting that we need to get this audited, which is really why we're here today. So look, we'll take a steer from the end of the meeting, and we will go away and do what we need to do and bring it back to you in June for a decision. That is the timeline that we are working to. We'll probably make a day and a night available for that meeting is what I'm suggesting, with a small smiley emoji face at the end of that.
So
It's working. On red?
So
I'm going green again.
So hang on a minute. Mark's just asked for some clarification around B. He's not sure what we're asking for, whether we're asking for 4.7 million just in year one to be funded through debt, or because there was a suggestion to that would mean
So I
if it was
made
just in year one, it would involve a higher rates rise in year two, right?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm really asking for clarity. I know what the motion says. I'm actually asking for clarification as to what do you want us to do from years 2 onwards. It's easy to say go away and redo the financial strategy. What do I do? Is my financial strategy saying that you are loading up your debt in year 1 of $4.7 million and then increasing rates to cover that shortfall in year 2? Or is the financial strategy modelling that you have $4.7 million to plug the gap in year 2? So just some clarification, because we can sit here all afternoon and say the 6% can cover 4.7, it won't do the depreciation, but what is the intention of the table for year 2 for that shortfall? Because then that'll allow us to be able to give you an answer for recommendation C.
So the conversation I heard was that the aim was to soften the blow over 3 years, the first 3 years of the long-term plan. That's what I heard Councillor Kirby say, I think.
Yes, and in my right of introduction, I suggested that I would be happy to put year 1 specifically in the motion so that it was clear for staff with that direction. But we didn't make that adjustment to the wording that was on the screen and vote on that particular wording. The intent was.
Would you like to move another recommendation to that effect to clarify this? Oh, we do actually. Yeah.
Can we reword motion C? Maybe we need to take an
We do have a
adjournment.
motion.
Reword motion C, although there is a motion that is needing to be voted on.
Yeah. So we've got motion C on the table. I think I'll just, unless we have anybody wanting to move an amendment, I'll just continue debate on C, and then we'll go back and clarify that extra motion around B. So,
Yeah.
Councillor Cooper.
Yes, interesting, because I have always struggled at 6% a year for the next 10 years, essentially doubling our rates in year 7 or 8. And it has been my opinion that we haven't really done the work around the affordability of that for our ratepayers. So I was actually intending to vote against C today on my own principle that I just can't stomach 6% on our ratepayers every year for the next 10 years. However, I find myself now with councillors arguing for a rate increase to 7 or 8 or 9 or 10% every year for the next 10 years. So I find myself in the position where I actually have to support something that I wasn't going to support to try and stop our councillors arguing for a rate increase over the next 10 years on the basis that bringing our debt down from, let's just say, 300 million to 296 million. So with that, a bit like Nigel, I'm sort of a vexed position. It's the cats are amongst the pigeons. So yeah, I'd like to hear some more from around the table, but that's sort of where I'm at. Bearing in mind I'm part of the problem because I voted for the 12% over the 17%.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I think we find ourselves in this really twilight zone where the people who voted against the first motion will probably want to vote in favour of this, and the people who voted against the motion the first time will want. So we've got a contradictory motion thing happening, and so what we've had 3 speakers so far, each of whom is going, I don't know, it's not sorted, and until it is sorted, I think what we're doing is we're speculating. We're voting on a speculative process, and I'm not sure that's helpful. I think my advice for what it's worth would be to go and have a cup of tea, have a think about what that motion might mean, that if there's some clarity around it, that it can get support. Because I'm with Glenn. I don't agree with Comrade Cooper in terms of the 6%. I'm okay with 6% each year, but I understand where he's coming from. But I'm pretty sure he's not coming from a position that says let's increase rates by 9% every year. Do you know what I mean? And then what that would do, that would completely undermine the first vote. So if you took the first vote again, I wouldn't dare to say what Comrade Cooper might do, but he might say, well, I'm not sure that's what I'm voting for. Do you know what I mean? So, and this is a more iterative process than we perhaps thought it was going to be.
Yes, indeed. Look, I'm going to suggest we take a short break. I know we haven't voted on this yet, but it sounds like some councillors need some more information, so we're going to get that up on the screen, and then we'll talk about a potential way forward, because we've been going over 2 hours. So we'll take a break until 5:02. Thank you.